processed meats. Now, all of us that were kids grew up, at the,
And the
eating deli
turkey, the
meats,
ham, and the
turkey
yes,
and the ham, right? I mean, like that's basically you. What did your
childhood.
mom? What did your mom pack in your lunch bag, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, well, that's a relic of the 1950s.
Mm.
Of this sort of ultra processed foods that are everywhere, laden with chemicals. That's not what we want to be doing. Now, I have to say, it doesn't mean categorically that hams or sausages are bad for you, because if you go to Italy, or if you go to places in Asia or Latin America where they create dried meats kind of the old way, they're not putting chemicals in there and
Mm.
they're not manipulating it. But here, where you go to the deli counter and like
Yeah.
take a look at that deli meat, like that's not meat, doesn't come like that. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
So here's the thing. Processed meats are actually classified by the World Health Organization as a carcinogen,
Mm.
and linked to the causation of cancer. You got to eat a lot of it,
Wow.
but a lot of people actually eat. I mean, how many hoagies or
Yeah, a
subs,
lot. Yeah.
right?
Wow.
And I got to say, like when I was growing up as a kid, I loved those kind of like fancy kind of like the deli meats and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Totally not good for you. So
Wow.
that's not good for you. It also damages the gut microbiome.
Mm.
And it can actually damage your DNA. So you want to kind of be cut down or cut out sodas and processed meats. And then the other thing is really a category, and I call these ultra processed foods.
Mm.
So things are in a box or in a can that like are instant this, or scoop it out and eat it quick. I don't want to name any particular products. I don't want to call any products out, but I think we all know the stuff. A lot of stuff we grew up with and were advertised on television to kids.
Right.
The frosted this, the pop that, the things that they're like the TV dinners, like things that used to be like instant foods. Got to be really careful about that, because if you take a look at the packaging, and I'm telling you, there's one thing your viewers can get from me about things to watch out for. Whatever you buy, pick it up. If it's in a box or in a can, and look on the side. Don't look just at the label. Look at at the name of it. Look at the side and see if you recognize
Mm.
the ingredients. If you start, if you start losing track and you can't pronounce and you don't know what most of that stuff is, it's an ultra processed food that
Mm.
harms your DNA, that lowers your immunity, that screws up your gut microbiome. It impairs angiogenesis. It actually causes our cells to age faster. Those telomeres burn down faster.
Oh, man. By those processed foods.
Yeah. Ultra processed foods, ultra,
Okay.
right?
What's the
This
difference
is
between ultra and
okay.
processed?
So look, processing is technically any type of food you manipulate. I like if you pick a tomato and you cut it up and you make spaghetti sauce at home, that's processing. You're processing it. Okay. If you're taking flour and an egg and you're making homemade pasta, you're processing it. I'm talking about ultra processed. There's a
Got it.
term called extrusion. Have you heard of this?
Yes.
Okay. So basically, you've got these die cut machines that like this goop gets thrown into, and like the big oil, like crazy oils get thrown in there, and then it just like pushes out like Play-Doh chunks of food that get cut and dried. That's what I'm talking about. Like that's the ultra processing. It takes, I guess maybe the definition, it takes food and transforms it into a form you don't recognize.
Got it. Okay. The
You don't
ultra
recognize that
processing.
food.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
don't want that. I'm curious,
No.
Dr. Lee, what do you think has been the biggest aha for you in your decades of work through from medical school to your research to your practice to these things? What was the biggest aha when you learned this thing? It changed everything for you.
There've been so many instances of that. Like, as a scientist, I'm seeing new things literally on a weekly basis. Things are like my jaw
Really?
drops virtually. Like last week, Lewis, I read about a new discovery that we just discovered a new type of human cell in our heart last week.
Wow.
Like, like that's like I hit my head like, oh my God, really? We a couple years ago, we discovered a new brain cell called the rose hip neuron. Okay. And it seems to be linked to depression. So I'm always amazed. I mean, as a scientist, I'm amazed by the marvelousness of the body and how much we don't know about it. And still, so we have to respect it. Did you know, by the way, that we had it also, this is just this past year, 2021, there was a landmark discovery that changed everything we knew about our metabolism.
What is that?
Well, so everybody says that, like when you're a teenager, you're growing tall.
You got a high metabolism. You're just burning calories.
Right? Yeah. Okay. Totally wrong. Metabolism's going down when you're a teen. Okay. And then people say when you're in your 20s or 30s, and you're starting to gain weight and getting out of shape. And they're like, man, my metabolism is slowing down. And then some people basically say that, I was unlucky because I was born with a bad metabolism. Look at my sister or look at my cousin. She's rail thin. She's so lucky she's got a fast metabolism, right? All that has been upended completely. It turns out that all humans go through only 4 phases of metabolism in their whole life.
Tell me.
Okay. I'm going to show you this because it's actually right here on my desk.
You got a chart. You got a graph. You got a chart.
I got a paper. This baby right here. It's in a journal of science. Okay. This is how researchers do it. Like all around my office, man, like I am reading this stuff, and this paper, I tell you, I got to look at this. It studied like 8,000 people from like 30 countries, and it studied people from 8 days old to 90 years old across 20 different countries. All right. This is the largest study of human metabolism ever undertaken. And here's what they found, that if you subtracted out body fat, and which is different for everybody, okay, and you were to just go right down to the core of real metabolism, energy usage, energy generation, here are the 4 phases. When we're born, we got the same metabolism as our mother. Makes sense. Synchronized. Okay. From 0 or from the day you're born to 1 year old, your metabolism skyrockets. In fact, it's twice high when you're 1 year old as when you're 20 years old.
Wow.
Okay. So from 1 year old down to throughout your teenage years and puberty, at the time you think that you're eating a lot and your metabolism is going sky high, it's actually coming down from its peak.
Interesting. Why does it seem like you're burning so many calories?
Well, you're more active and you're growing.
Yeah.
So you may be burning more calories, but your metabolism isn't changing. This is the key thing. We are hardwired to go through these phases. Now it's going down to 20 years old, from 20 years old to 60 years old. Okay. From college to retirement, it doesn't change. It is rock stable.
Huh.
All right. So and then after 60, it starts to diminish, but not as fast as you think. It's a slow grade down. Okay. 4 phases of human metabolism. We never knew this before this year. All right. This is how new it is. So here's the key thing. What makes all the difference between people? Like why is your metabolism different than mine? And why is a sumo wrestler's metabolism different than, somebody who's on a runway in Milan? Okay. And it has to do with the fact that our metabolisms are all the same, but the lifestyle choices that we make can actually push our metabolism one way or the other. So our metabolism doesn't cause us to be fat. Our fat slows down our metabolism. It's the other way around.
Interesting.
Completely the way around.
So how do we burn more fat then to
speed
up our metabolism?
That's what I'm working on right now. And that is the topic of my next book, by the way, which I'm writing right now. Yeah. Okay. So stay tuned for that answer, because I'm onto something really hot on that. And I will give you a little bit of a
sneak peek. What's that early finding? Peek. Yes.
Well, you can eat certain foods to burn your fat down.
Ooh,
so
what?
While caloric restriction and fasting can actually also do it, it turns out there are certain foods that you can actually eat that will trigger it.
Ooh,
You want
what are
to?
those? Give me some of those.
I don't want to give you a too much. I don't want to give yours a spoiler because I'll have you come. I'll have you invite me back on the show and we'll
Yeah,
talk about that when
we'll
my
have
next
you
comes
back
up.
on for sure. We'll have you back on
Yeah.
for sure. You can give us the whole debrief. But what would you say are a couple of these foods at least that you think that are now researched and proven to be powerful fat burning, I guess, tools?
I'll give you one that's actually just a surprise. Is seafood actually?
Seafood
Yeah.
helps burn fat.
Yep.
Is it help burn fat, or it starts to trigger and activate the fat
Triggers.
burning process?
It triggers. So there are certain elements in food that are newly discovered in research. Like
Wow.
I just told you some new stuff that's coming out of the hot off the presses. But I can tell you, like this is what I do. The research that if I told you about research about biotech developments, it may not actually mean anything to you for 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
maybe ever, never. Okay. But when there's research about food or about your health, a lot of times there's stuff that has immediacy. You can put it to use right away. So cancer starving foods, regenerative foods, gut health foods that can also help your brain, foods that slow down cellular aging, foods that lower inflammation and boost your immune system at the same time. That's what I'm talking about, because the power of healing rests inside our body. And healthcare is not something that we need to rely on when we go to the doctor's office, right? Every year you go once. Healthcare is everything in between that we do for ourselves, and food is a medicine that we take.
Absolutely. I've talked about this many times on my show before, that I grew up in a specific religion called Christian Science, where it was more the practice of spiritual awareness, and that were spiritual ideas, and less on using medicine to heal, but more using the mind and awareness to heal, thought, which would then heal the physical body. So medicine was never really a thing I studied or really took growing up. It was just kind of like when we got sick or when something happened, we used thought, prayer, spiritual prayer to kind of remind ourselves of who we are. But I'm curious, do you think that people could live without modern medicine if they eat properly? Like all the things that you talk about in your book, Eat to Beat Disease, do you think we could live longer lives, healthier lives without the need of certain medicines? Or are you saying we should be using medicine and eating food when we need them?
Well, we should be eating to enrich our lives from the time we're young all the way until our last breath. And that should actually be able to tackle about 2/3 of all the chronic diseases. And by the way, about 1/3 of all cancers are thought to be due to diet and lifestyle. 1/3 of cancers. All right. We ought to be able to dodge. But you got to start early, right? I mean, this is not one of these things where I've been smoking my whole life and now I'm going to actually turn over a new leaf. It's never too late to quit, by the way. However, the fact of the matter is that so you grew up, as in the Christian Science framework,
which you're in the Boston area, so
that's where the hub is.
The Mother Church is in Boston. Yes,
it's amazing. It's an amazing place, a really spectacular place to visit, and a very special place actually. But I will tell you that the idea of having formative years groomed in a healthy mindset,
yes,
which is I think what you're talking about,
yes,
is so important, so that if you've got kids and if you're involved with teaching and if you're involved with a business where you can actually impact on kids, think about the impact that you have now could actually influence their health 30, 40, 50, 60 years from now. And that to me is a big responsibility. It's a giant opportunity to make a better society.
That's beautiful. I'm curious, we've got a few more minutes left. What do you think? You're telling me that every week you're essentially finding these aha moments based on the research papers you're finding and things that you're discovering yourself. And what do you think, in your mind, if you could predict the future 10 years out, 5, 10 years out, what are going to be the groundbreaking things that we as humans discover in the next 5 to 10 years that is going to transform our health?
Wow.
Based on what you've seen in the last 5 to 10 years, and where you're like, these are unbelievable. Every month there's new
Yeah.
findings. What do you think is on the horizon for us?
Well, one thing that I think is one of the big aha jaw droppers for me in the kind of the journey that I've actually had in my career is the fact that we can regenerate ourselves. Okay. And I never thought that was even possible. I had been working in stem cell therapy and regenerative medicine. And, it's a real struggle. It's an uphill climb to really try to show that we can actually regenerate the heart or the brain or nerves. And yet the body does it every single day. And when I discovered that, you could regenerate tissue by barley, eating barley, which is beta D glucan, or with chocolate, as I mentioned to you, cacao polyphenols, or even olive oil. There's something called hydroxytyrosol. It's a natural chemical in extra virgin olive oil. It helps to kind of make that distinctive olive oily taste. That can actually help to protect your stem cell. Or if you are not a vegan but you eat seafood and you're really adventurous, that black pasta squid ink that they have sometimes on menus. I happen to I like to explore different kinds of food. Squid ink actually protects your stem cells. Wow. It's like a shield. Okay, and so the fact that we can actually eat to regenerate. So I'm very excited by this idea that we can eat foods, and we're still discovering what foods can help propel our body's regenerative capacity. I think that's going to actually be groundbreaking. And then something that I'm actually working on that is really, future forward, right? So you're asking like, what's going to be mind blowing in the future?
Yes.
All right. Well, look, I'm kind of like a pretty down to earth guy. Like I believe that we should be protecting our planet, doing everything we can to take care of, nurture this ball that we live on, and we should be doing better for our community. But I think from the time I was a kid, I appreciated and I was excited by this idea of space travel, which is now happening more often, right? All right. So here's something I think is going to happen over the next decade. As humans become extraterrestrial, we're going to be the first extraterrestrials we're ever going to meet is ourselves. And we get beyond near Earth orbit, our bodies are going to be bombarded by galactic radiation and have the effects of negative gravity changing our body. We got to find out what kinds of foods or supplements that we got to eat to protect ourselves.
That's crazy.
So I'm working on that.
That's cool.
So I've been meeting with astronauts. I've been talking to people in the space program, flight surgeons. And what I'm figuring is that if we can figure out what we're going to need in the future for that, we could probably bring that right down to Earth right now to actually do something good for us. So that's, so I'm excited by that.
That's cool. That's really cool.
How do we optimize our metabolism? Like, what are some foods that you think we can eat? How should we eat? What types of activities should we be doing every single day that you found to be useful in like optimizing the metabolism?
Well, the first thing I sort of want to share is an explanation of what is metabolism, because I think this is a term that everyone thinks they know something about, but I'm telling you, there's a new science of the metabolism that is changing the way that we understand everything. And it's so new that some of the information is less than 2 years old. The old textbooks are still being ripped up and thrown out the window. The new ones haven't even been written yet. So we're talking about some real cutting edge stuff. The first point is that our metabolism, as a scientist, I could throw a lot of very, very complicated scientific terms at you, but I'm not going to do it. Your metabolism is your body system to be able to use fuel in your body to run your body's engines. Just like if you have a car and you have an engine that makes the car run, you have to put fuel into the car, okay, in order to be able to run that engine. So in a car, when you're driving and you look at the fuel gauge and the tank is running low, what do? You pull over to the gas station and you pull out and fill up the tank. When the tank is full, the nozzle clicks, put it back, and then you drive off. Our body is the same way. When our engines are running, it's our metabolism, how to use that energy and fuel. When our fuel tank runs low, our fuel gauge runs low, it's in our brain. and it's hardwired in our muscles and our organs. When it runs low, what do? We don't go to a filling station. We pull over to the dinner table. We pull over to the restaurant. We pull over to the snack bar, to the refrigerator, to the pantry. All right. And what are we doing? We are actually getting fuel. Hey there. I've got something important to share with you. And that is my guide to the 3 healthy foods that you might want to avoid if you're looking for longevity. Many products that are marketed as nutritious can actually undermine your health. And if you want to find out more about these sneaky ingredients and how to make better choices, then just click on the link below the video for all the details. It's very important to know what's really in your food. And this resource that I'm giving you gives you a head start. Get it right now for free in the description below. Or you can access the guide by scanning the QR code on the screen with your smartphone. Now, let's jump back into the video. So just like fueling up your car. So when we actually pick up fuel to put into our body, think about the analogy I just gave you with the car and fuel. Good quality fuel that you put into your car, your gas tank, is going to make your engine run a lot longer. Your car could take a crappy, low quality gas once or twice, when you're filling, that's all that's available, right? To get you back on the road. But if you actually continuously put low quality fuel, crappy quality fuel, and you started to have contaminated gasoline into that fuel, whether it's contaminated with chemicals or sugar or whatever else it is, you will actually destroy your engine over time. Same deal when it comes to food in our engine. Our food is our fuel, our body, our metabolism runs that energy, and the quality makes all the difference in the world. Now, I want to talk about some specific foods that help our metabolism run really, really well. But in addition to, one way that I want to say about how do we wreck our metabolism, okay, is just using the same analogy as the gas station. Now, imagine you go to pull up to the filling station with your car and you put the nozzle in your gas tank. The gas tank is full, and normally the nozzle clicks when the gas tank is full, and it's not going to fill anymore. No more gas comes out, and you pull it out and you're good to go. Our body doesn't have a clicker. So when we sit down to put fuel in our body, and you say overeating, all right, that's what we're doing. Where there's no clicker, we're just continuing to shove food into our body. Now, what happens when you're actually at a filling station if your gas tank were to overflow? All right, it would run down the side, out of the tank, down the side of the car, around the wheels. It would pool around your feet, and you'd be standing in this flammable, toxic, dangerous mess, right? And you would hope that the air, you'd have to walk away and the air would evaporate the gasoline, right? Now, we don't have the same luxury when we eat. When we eat and we overeat, what we're doing is we are overloading the tanks in our body, and our body has to put that extra fuel somewhere. It can't evaporate. So what our body does is it takes extra fuel and it stuffs it into our fat cells. Our fat cells are normal fuel tanks, all right? So when we eat, we're using the energy. Anything extra gets stored into little fat cells. Fat cells get bigger, bigger, bigger. All right. And then if you're eating normal amounts, it'll store some extra energy. Then when you're done eating, it'll burn down that fuel. Now, if you actually continuously overload the gas tank, you're going to fill up that fat fuel tank. It's going to be blisteringly big, like a water balloon. And then guess what? Your body says, we still got more fuel. You overate. Now you got to make more fat cells, fuel tanks, and it's going to fill those up. And that gets filled up. Now you got to make another one, and it's going to fill up. And now you kind of see why putting too much fuel in our body causes us to actually gain extra body fat. That extra body fat is like a toxic mess that are standing in that gasoline, that overflowed gas tank is like. It's flammable. It's inflammation, which is like flame inside our body. That sets us up for a big problem. The good news about that is we can actually eat less. So being mindful that that's how our body works. You eat less is really, really helpful. So I always tell people, stop eating when you feel satisfied, but before you feel full. And if you eat slower, your stomach will text message your brain to tell you like when it's actually naturally full. The other thing you can do that would be incredibly important to actually keep your metabolism going well is not to eat too close to bedtime and not to eat too close to getting up in the morning. Because when we are actually eating food, there's a hormone called insulin that our pancreas, our body produces. And insulin works to draw that food fuel as energy into our cells. That's what insulin does. All right. And when our insulin is up, it's the signal in our body is our metabolisms that store the fuel, baby. Don't burn it, store it. We want to gobble it all up and pack it away. All right. It's like ammo for energy. When our insulin is down, which is when we're not eating, our metabolism shifts gears and says, all right, time to tap into the fuel. So if you want to burn that extra fuel that's stored in your tanks, which is your fat cells, you might have extra fat from overeating yesterday or overeating the last week or the last month or from the holidays, whatever it is, your celebration. All right. The fact is that your body is actually hardwired to burn that down, but it only burns it down when you are not eating, because the insulin goes down and your metabolism shifts gears to actually be in fat burning mode. This happens when we're sleeping, naturally, by the way. And when we're sleeping, we're not eating. By the way, another name for that is fasting, which is why when we get up in the morning and we have our coffee and our eggs or whatever, it's called breakfast. Breakfast is breaking your overnight fast. Break fast. All right. And so what you hear about intermittent fasting isn't just a trend, isn't kind of like this crazy, new way of actually living your life. It's how our body's hardwired to do it every single day. When you're sleeping, you're fasting. When you're fasting, your insulin's down. When your insulin's down, your metabolism goes, shoop, let's go ahead and start burning down extra fuel. All right. So if you don't eat too close to bedtime, like when you stop eating, okay, let's say you go to bed at 11 and you get up at 7 in the morning. That's 8 hours of sleep. I strongly recommend that as a generally good optimal amount of time of sleep to get. Cleans your brain, it gets rid of the toxins, it actually resets your immune system, all kinds of things. It calms stress, lowers inflammation, good quality 8 hours of sleep. Now, let's say that you eat dinner, so you go to bed from 11 and get up at 7, 8 hours. Let's say that you eat dinner at 7 o'clock in the evening, all right? And for most people, let's say that you finish eating at around 8, an hour later, you put their dishes away in the sink at 8 o'clock, all right? Now, how many of us actually eat a little snack later? We go for some dessert. We're before bedtime. I got to eat one more thing. All right. Don't want to do that, because every time you do that close to bedtime, you're spiking your insulin. When the insulin goes up, your metabolism isn't able to burn fat. If you stop eating when you put your dishes in the sink, so let's say that you eat dinner at 7, you stop eating at 8, put your dishes in the sink, no more food. That's it. Okay, you'll get used to it. It'll be cool. Don't worry. All right. And you go to bed at 11. From 8 to 11, you've given your body 3 extra hours. You've given your metabolism the gift of 3 extra hours to burn down that extra fuel that's gotten stuck and trapped in your body. And if you get up at 7 in the morning, rather than roll out of bed and do what our mommies told us to do when we were kids, hurry up and eat breakfast so you can get on the school bus and go to school on time. All right. If you get up instead, let's say it's 7, take a shower, get dressed, check your emails, read a book, read a newspaper, whatever it is you're going to do, go for a walk. An hour later, you sit and have a breakfast. You've given your body, your metabolism, the gift of an extra hour in the morning that you burn down fuel. So let's do some math. 3 hours after the dishes are in the sink before bedtime, plus 8 hours of sleeping time, that's 11 hours, plus 1 extra hour before you actually sit down and eat breakfast. It's reasonable to do. Anybody can actually do that, honestly. But do the math, 3 plus 8 plus 1. Now it's 12 hours. You've given your body 50% of your life is spent towards streamlining your metabolism by burning down that extra body fat. That's how you allow your inner metabolism to start to rise to the surface. So without actually having to even go on any kind of crazy diet, any fads, any elimination, you can just kind of use that timing and of course the amount to eat, like always leave some white space on your plate. Don't go back for seconds and quit the clean plate club. That's a way before we even talk about what are some good choices to add, that you can actually use your body to fight on your behalf.
I love that explanation. And it just seems like the main thing somebody can do to improve the function of their metabolism is to lose excess body fat. And the best way to do that without necessarily going on a specific diet or focusing on specific foods is to just eat less than you are now and finding creative ways to do that. One of them being almost like the time restricted feeding window, like you said, almost like you don't eat past a certain time, you eat like an hour after you get up or something like that?
In my book, Eat to Beat Your Diet, I call it, once you realize what time you finish dinner and what time you eat breakfast, you can set your own, it's like an alarm on your watch or your phone. You can set the time you're going to open your eating window in the morning, okay? And you can set what time you're going to close the eating window so you're not going to eat anymore, right? And you can even set an alarm on your phone if you need a reminder. But actually, if you realize that the time that you're not eating after you put the dishes away, your body's actually starting to shift into gear to start to streamline your metabolism. That's kind of an awareness. You can't unlearn that. Like once you hear that, then next time you actually reach for that brownie or that piece of cake or whatever it is, bag of chips, like some voice in your head is going to say, wait a minute. I don't want to be interfering with my body right now. My body actually wants to do something. Another part of your brain might be saying, go ahead and eat it, right? That's the angel and the devil kind of on both shoulders warring with your brain. But again, this is where I think by understanding what your goals are, you realize that your body wants to help you. It's trying to help you. It's there for you, man. Like it's got your back. And so by putting that in your head, it's an easy thing. Now you want to take that to the next level. And this is what I write about in my new book, Eat to Beat Your Diet. What's really cool is that during the time you're eating, it turns out that food doesn't always grow fat. In fact, the research has shown some foods actually, during the day, even when your insulin is up, some foods will actually cause your body to fight extra body fat and streamline your metabolism while you're eating. So just now, before I was telling you, when insulin is up, when you're eating, your body's metabolism is all about storing the food and not burning it. And when you're not eating and your insulin's down, it'll actually start to burn the fuel. There's an exception to that rule, and that's if you choose. And I wrote about 150 different foods proven by human studies, research studies, that when you eat them in moderation, these foods and the natural chemicals contained in them will fire up your metabolism so you can eat to lose and burn down extra body fat so you can streamline your metabolism. That to me is a really amazing thing because it's good news. You can choose foods. I mean, who would have thought you can eat foods to lose weight? Doesn't make sense, right? Yes, it does. The science teaches us and the clinical studies show us it can be actually done.
What are the top things that you would say that people are doing every day that actually create those potholes when it comes to our vascular health? I know you like to focus on what we can add, but I'd also like to talk about what's causing the most damage when it comes to our vascular health and our overall blood flow throughout the body.
Yeah. Okay. So that's really an important thing to think about. Like I spend most of my time developing positive messages that people can lean into. But if you want to start from a level playing field, you got to think about, all right, how do you unload and unburden your body's health defenses so you're not working against yourself? That's kind of like what we're talking about. What are the things that people commonly do that work against your health defenses? So you're sitting down and suppressing your defenses. Well, let's walk through a couple of them. Number one is physical inactivity, right? Like, I mean, think about during the pandemic, a lot of people were just not doing as much, not outdoors as much, not exercising as much, not socializing as much, not traveling as much. And, and there's a lot of depression too. And so physical activity, even 30 minutes of moderate physical activity, get your heart rate up, walk out, like everybody feels a little bit better after taking a walk, no matter how stressed out you are. And even if you're not stressed out, you feel better. It gets your circulation going. Exercise like that lowers inflammation. Being physically inactive, the couch potato actually is incredibly. Being a couch potato is incredibly damaging. By the way, I heard like when you walk, you rev up your metabolism as well. I saw the study that I was just looking at for the next book I'm writing. That's really amazing. It turns out if you are going to be a couch potato, that sitting down a lot, there was a research study done on this, even fidgeting, the knee going bump, 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 or, fidget with like one of those fidget toys, even that starts to burn calories compared to just not moving at all, like just sitting there and staring at a screen. And so again, movement, physical activity, really important actually to kind of rev up your metabolism, get back to better health, and unleash your health defenses. Another thing is really eating a lot of ultra processed foods. All of us who go to the grocery store, are tempted to go into the middle aisle. It's almost like a siren calls you into the middle aisle to look at all the colorful, packaged, ultra processed things. Calls you. It's like the siren that calls the ship captain to wind up on the rocks and then sink the ship. Well, this is the middle aisle of the grocery store. Now, there's a lot of good stuff there too as well, but I think most of us go for the things that have been advertised to us since we were a kid to go look for those sweets and things in the middle aisle. Well, it turns out that if you take the time to go around the perimeter first and go to the produce section, and that's where you should spend most of your time when you're grocery shopping, looking for what's fresh and plant-based, and it really kind of rev up your dietary fiber and your bioactives. That's what's really good. But the middle aisle, it's hard to stay out of. And so when people eat boxed foods, jarred foods, canned foods that are laced with chemical preservatives and processed, made up using factory processes that take whole food and turn them into this weird machined food, extruded food, food that your grandmother or great-grandmother would not recognize as food. And then you add these synthetic chemicals to it. Man, does that actually work against your body's health defenses.
Wow. And, there's been so much conversation these days about being mindful. This goes into the category of ultra processed foods, but being mindful about the overall sort of load of sugar and highly refined carbohydrates. We've done multiple episodes about continuous glucose monitors and just being more aware about the order of food. So maybe you go to a restaurant and instead of having the bread and the butter, which everybody likes to do here and there, especially if it's a nice piece of sourdough, or we're lucky here in Los Angeles, there's a few places that will import in wheat from Italy. You were talking about Italy and the quality of ingredients there. So instead of having those at the beginning of your dinner when you sit down at the restaurant, maybe saving that piece of bread for the end after you have some fiber, some healthy fats and protein inside of there. How important is sequencing to you? And do you think of it in the context of the advice that you give folks when you're talking about food as medicine?
Very important. Sequencing, first of all, I believe that we should eat food not only for our health, but to bring us joy. Okay. And so there's nothing wrong with eating foods that you really enjoy that are also healthy for you. And I think that's really the alignment we're going to have. And when you have a spread of food in front of you, whether it's at a restaurant and you get your bread and butter, and then you get your salad, then you get your main, then you get your dessert. Okay. There's kind of like a ritual order that it goes in, but nobody said that you have to eat it in the order that it's actually served to you. What I think when it comes to food is that you should eat the healthiest things first and save other bits really on the side. Take a little nibble of them. The problem, that you talk about with bread, okay, even good quality bread like, homemade sourdough bread with stuff from Italy. The problem with that is that if you sit down when you're really hungry and that's the first thing that you're served, you're going to eat a lot of it. I try to tell people, don't waste your appetite. You're going to have a certain amount of appetite. You don't want to load up on the stuff that's not necessarily high quality calories and bioactives. What I do when I actually sit at a restaurant, I don't eat the bread right away. I look at the menu. I look at the whole menu. And what I try to do is to recognize ingredients that are healthy and then see if they are actually listed in offerings that I really am drawn towards, attracted towards. Something with capers. I know capers have a lot of chlorogenic acid too, or quercetin. Wow, look at that. That's an interesting salad. I've never had that before. Let me try that. And I size up the whole meal. And then I will order, but I'm not eating the bread first before I even look at that. And I'm like, I'm kind of full up. I'm just going to get like the family style pasta for myself. Now you got bread. Now you got pasta. Now you've kind of like just distorted your whole kind of thing. So what I say is that look on the menu for the things that are good for you. And by the way, sometimes you can order. Sometimes there's really good stuff that's ordered in smaller plates, and you can just order 2 of those or even 3 of those without ordering an entree, and so there's no rhyme or reason. I don't want to say that you should eat dessert first and your main last. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that spend the quality of your time eating the things that are tasty and good for you.
On the topic of things that are good for you, I love your Instagram. And by the way, everybody who's listening, if you want more of this information, little preview, Dr. William Li has so many great resources that are out there. This is an incredible free webinar that your team is doing on a regular basis. We'll link to it inside of the show notes, as well as your Instagram is another great resource because you'll always make me excited about an ingredient or food that I thought I knew about, but then maybe I forgot to include on a regular basis. And this is one of those foods that was in your Grand Slam, sorry, a little tongue twister, Grand Slam PDF. Again, we have the link to where to download that inside of the show notes. And also I saw you do an Instagram TV or an Instagram live video on this recently, and that's sunflower seeds. So,
hey there, if you're ready to take control of your health using the power of food, then I encourage you to check out my Eat to Beat Disease online course. More than 4,000 people from 80 countries have taken it, and now they know how to eat to beat disease. And you can too. I personally developed all the material in this course, drawing from my latest research and my years of experience. It's designed to give you practical, science-based strategies that you can use to boost your health every single day. To learn more, click the link below.
Why should we be excited about sunflower seeds? If you can remember some of the key highlights and talking points that you shared about why you like to include this ingredient in your diet on a regular basis.
Well, one of the things that I love about sunflower seeds is they taste really good. They're nutty. They have this kind of really delicate kind of flavor. And they're not very crunchy. They're kind of soft. And they're very commonly eaten in the Mediterranean, lightly roasted. And so it's a great treat. It's a good source of dietary fiber. And there's also a bioactive in it called SDG. I'm not going to even bother going into the chemical name, pronounce what the S and the D and the G stands for. But I can tell you that actually it protects your stem cells. And yes, sunflower seeds do belong to the Grand Slammers. But I will also tell you that the fact that there's dietary fiber to feed your gut microbiome, which helps your metabolism, helps you heal better, makes you feel better, and actually activates your brain and improves your mood. Sunflower seeds are a great way of snacking. And the protection against for your stem cells also means that it helps your body renew itself from the inside out. Now, sunflower seeds are something I like to keep around, like just a little bowlful, like if I'm for a snack. That's the other thing I like about it. You don't have to eat up like a couple of fistfuls of the stuff for it to be good for you. You can just kind of like chew on them a little bit by bit, and you feel totally satisfied. And it's a great source of fiber and other bioactives.
Does it matter if we eat them raw or not, or roasted? Should we be worried about how much sodium might come if they are roasted? Just any kind of considerations. And I guess people could think about this when they're thinking about all sort of seeds and nuts that they want to include in their diet. So we'd love to hear your take on it.
Such an important thing. So, like what I do is I like to buy just a bag of sunflower seeds or cashews or walnuts that isn't actually pre-seasoned. I like to do it myself, honestly, or sometimes like sunflower seeds, I don't mind them if they're not seasoned at all. I kind of like the fact that they're actually even a little sweet, and they're not cloyingly sweet, but they're definitely not salty. You can salt them if you want, but be very careful about commercial brand seasoned nuts and seeds, because oftentimes they are loaded with salt. Also, sometimes they're loaded with unhealthy oils because to roast them, they'll coat them with really unhealthy saturated fats, and then they roast them and they'll dump salt on them and they'll shake all the salt off. And that'll be a pretty tasty bag. That I guarantee you. Like, it'll be kind of addictive to go through them, but man, your sodium will go through the roof. And then if you get the barbecued flavors and then the pizza flavored and all those other kinds of things that might sound attractive on the label, just remember, mostly those are seasonings, that some of which are synthetic and are engineered to taste like something with artificial, something synthetic. Like, that's not what you want. And so I like to go for the elemental, natural flavors. If I'm going to season it, like cashews, I might season myself a little bit. Walnuts, I don't need seasoning. Pecans or almonds, I don't really need seasoning. But if you're going to use seasoning, just take a little pinch of sea salt, okay? And you can just sprinkle it on it, mix it around. You'll get a little bit of salt, but you do not want to actually. This is not shaker style. You don't want to do that.
Yeah, the interesting thing about it is that the level of sodium that comes in these highly processed snacks that are already prepared for us. I was even using a spice yesterday that is from a very healthy company and known as a healthy company. The spice was organic. It's a pre-seasoning. And I was looking at the bag, and the bag, which had the spice inside of it that I was using for these chicken thighs that I was making to add to my base salad, my big fat salad, had avocado oil, had olive oil, some avocados, olives, a bunch of really just good and healthy things, including fermented beets. That's usually my sort of chosen way of having beets in my diet, and other great vegetables. Anyways, I was looking at the bag on the back, and the amount of sodium that was in there was essentially almost 30% of the recommended daily value for one serving of that seasoning that's there. Now, the crazy thing is, I was doing the math online about what it would take for me at my house to use salt, right? High quality table salt or Himalayan salt or sea salt to get close to that amount. And what most of us forget is that if we wanted to salt our food at the level that it comes pre-seasoned by processed food companies, some which are still in that quote unquote healthy category, it actually wouldn't taste that good if we used salt ourselves to do that equivalent amount of sodium. You have to engineer it and do all sorts of things to make that amount of salt palatable. So I think for the most part, if people are just using a reasonable amount of sea salt at home, just to dust their meal or add a little bit to their roast veggies, you're going to be fine overall. It's actually very hard to get to levels of sodium that are coming in these processed foods that we pick up in the store. So I think the moral of the story, and feel free to disagree or agree, is just overall cutting down the amount of processed foods that we include in our diet, even being very wary of a lot of the healthy processed foods that are now being sold at Whole Foods and other places, because that's really where you get these large quantities of sodium from.
Yeah, I mean, it's always buyer beware. And the one sort of cheat that every commercial food provider, restaurants included, to make their food taste better is salt, because salt does make almost everything taste better, just like sugar makes everything taste better. A little bit's okay. The quantities that are often used are not okay. And I think that that's important to remember too. Along those same lines, your listeners should actually think about this. When you go to a restaurant, if you were to actually go behind the scenes and see how the chefs are actually salting the food, you'd be surprised. They will grab like a big mound of salt and just throw it into a dish sometimes, and it'll taste really great, but you've got way more sodium in there than you ever thought. When I cook at home, I'll tell you, although I will be very cautious not to use too much salt, here's a little trick that people who cook at home can use. So if you're going to saute something in a pan, okay, I usually cook with olive oil over medium heat, not super high heat. I don't want to burn the stuff in the olive oil. And I wanted to put a little salt, just a little bit of salt. What I don't do is cook the food and then take the salt and throw it into the food after it's done. I will actually sometimes just take a pinch of salt and dust the olive oil while it's heating up. Now you're guaranteed not to actually put too much salt in it, because you can see exactly how much salt you're putting in. If you were to put like a spoonful of salt in there, you're like, man, I just ruined the whole pan. I can't use that pan. I got to clean it out and start it all over again. So I think, even if you're cooking at home, just having that awareness that, whether it's at home or a restaurant or at a ultra processed factory, somebody's putting salt in there, and it's up to you to determine how much you're going to allow into your body.
Why is it so controversial, and why are you so confident to be able to tell people, cut out these diet drinks from your diet?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think I have the same general outlook as you, and my own stance and my advice is very similar, which is take a precautionary stance and be informed. Look, I mean, life is for the living, so we all do things that are maybe not so good for us from time to time. But every time you commit yourself to making a decision like that, just be aware. It may not be so good for you. We may not be 100% certain. And of course, everyone's a little bit different. But here's what I read about in my book, because I was deeply researching this. What's the role of beverages? People say, well, fruit juices must be okay because they come from fruits, which are plant-based. Aren't you talking about eating plant-based foods? Yes. But again, this is, back to this idea of nuance, which is really important. I think that the science of the body is continuously changing and advancing so that we understand more and more what the impact is of something that we might consume and how our body responds to it. 10 years ago, there were some inklings that maybe diet soft drinks might not be so good for our metabolism. Now that we've dived deeper into gut health, we're beginning to see more concrete data that suggests that there is an impact. We also do know more greatly than ever that our gut health is so important for our overall health. And so when we start to put together this hypothesis and start to stitch together some of the information, the precautionary position is, be really careful about diet sodas and be careful about sodas in general. And so for my book, one of the things that I wanted to do is just to write about where's the safe harbor in all this, right? By the way, I take people in my book through as I was writing this section of my book on foods, I wrote for the reader, imagining that they were sitting in the grocery cart like we all did when we were kids in our mom's grocery cart. And she was pushing us through the grocery store. And what I'm doing is kind of whispering in your ear, telling you what is healthy and good for your metabolism to put in the grocery cart. And when we get to the beverage aisle, okay, there's a whole chapter on beverages. I really come to this conclusion that there are three beverages that I call the holy trinity for health. It's water, it's tea, and it's coffee in their elemental forms. Right? Not the stuff that's got the syrups and things put in them, not necessarily the flavored waters necessarily, but in their elemental forms. These three beverages all have very, very compelling and deep evidence that they actually benefit our physiology. They help our body do its things in a way. Everything else that's a beverage, when you consume it, there are ways of actually bringing joy and great flavor and taste. Don't deny that. But they're actually introducing things in your body that may or may not be so good for you. Look, everyone enjoys a sweet drink, of course. Remember when we were kids and you went to a function and you're a parent or an adult pours you a cup of punch, it's of a color that doesn't occur in nature, and you drink it and, oh, it's so great. Look, this is who we are. We're humans. We enjoy sweet things. Our brain is hardwired to enjoy sweet things. But I think that one of the things is if you have the awareness that things that we may enjoy may not be that good for us, and we're mindful about restricting, limiting, consuming only modestly, that's a good first step. I don't believe that people should go hardcore and just come off of everything that they enjoy. No. Nor do I really believe in villainizing foods. I think we should look at all the data. And nothing speaks more to this than even something that is beneficial to you, if you consume it in excess, can overwhelm our bodies. We're just human. Yeah. I think it's a couple of really important points to pause upon there. One is, as you were talking about diet soft drinks, you said that, look, we're all human. We all like to have things now and again that are probably not the best thing for us. And I think we need to acknowledge that and go, yeah, that is who we are. We all probably have our little tendencies, the things that we like to go to. Maybe it's stress. I know for me, if there's a lot of stress on in my life, and there is at the moment to do with my mum and her health, I tend to seek certain foods out that I know are probably not the best for me, but they're in that moment, they feel as though there's something that I want to consume. And I think we need to be honest about that. What we're not looking for is perfection. When you say diet drinks are probably not that helpful, if you're having the odd one now and again, it's probably going to be fine. But if you're having 3 or 4 of them a day, 7 days a week, 4 weeks a month, 12 months a year, there may be some consequences. And I think that nuance is really, really important. You mentioned also about these 3 beverages, water, tea, and coffee. Now, you didn't mention alcohol. There wasn't a 4th beverage, even though certain communities around the world who are written about, the blue zones, for example, to be long living, most of those blue zones, not all of them, I think. I don't think Loma Linda, the 5th blue zone, I don't think they consume alcohol. But the other 4, I believe, do consume alcohol. Now, I have some very clear views about alcohol and where that fits in.
how do you see alcohol in the context of our overall health? And I guess in relation to your latest book, around the context of fat loss?
Yeah. Well, I get asked this question all the time. Dr. Lee, what do you think about red wine or what about alcohol? And oftentimes the reason that someone's asking is either that they have heard that drinking red wine or drinking wine in the blue zones is touted as being associated with longevity or better health. And there are some clinical studies that also show some of these overall correlations of health benefit as well. I oftentimes think that people who are asking those questions are looking for a justification or an excuse for it. So I'm always trying to understand where the question is actually coming from. But I'm a scientist, and like you and I are both physicians. We have to answer very honestly, and the honest answer is that alcohol, ethanol, which is a chemical, it's a product of fermentation. It's actually what makes you feel boozy and drunk. Okay. There's no health benefit from it. It's a toxin. It's a toxin for virtually every organ in our body. It kills your brain, kills your liver, and you don't have to drink very much, frankly, of pure ethanol, the pure stuff, to knock yourself off. It is actually a poison. That said, wine and other spirits, again, are part of who we are as humans. It's part of our humanity. I mentioned a little bit earlier, from the time of earliest cultivation of agriculture, people have actually been cultivating grapes and fermenting them and not making just processed grape juice. They've been making wine. Wine actually has been a revered part of human tradition, religious ceremonies, celebrations. Wine and spirits are consumed at funerals, at holidays, celebrating the new year, cultures around the world. But in no case is the actual ethanol something that is healthy for you. It's that this is part of our human tradition. It's not done very frequently. And like anything else, if done in moderation, it's probably okay. Now, what about the blue zones? What about these Sardinian goat herders who actually do drink red wine every night, from the great Sardinian Cannonau red wine, which, actually is quite a nice wine. Here's the issue. They are doing almost everything else right in their lives. And so the alcohol that they're having is offset by all the other physical activity, low stress, social commitment, sense of purpose, other healthy, local, fresh foods that are actually grown and prepared in healthy ways, the absence of ultra-processed foods. They're not drinking a lot of diet sodas, diet or otherwise. And so in that sense, everything is a check and balance. Our body is like a gigantic calculator. So if you do everything else right, how much does a glass or two of red wine, of ethanol, do for you? Probably not much harm. And by the way, the fermentation product in red wine, if you remove the ethanol, the toxic stuff, all the other polyphenols are actually in the non-alcoholic part of the liquid. So, I think this nuance part is actually really important, as you brought up.
Yeah, there's just so much there. First of all, thank you for sharing your perspective. I think a lot about thresholds when I talk to my patients. There's also a course called Prescribing Lifestyle Medicine that is accredited by the Royal College of GPs that me and a colleague teach to healthcare professionals and doctors all over the world about how to use the principles of lifestyle medicine to personalize care for the individual patients. And we've created all these frameworks to help people do that. And I talk about thresholds a lot on that course and say, look, especially when you're looking at our lifestyle behaviors, it's not always about the one thing. It's about the combination of things. What else is going on? And I completely agree to go to these, the theoretical, mythical blue zones in our head. Let's say that goat herder in Sardinia, low levels of stress, strong community ties, local whole foods, right? Alcohol there is probably being used as a way of bonding and connecting. It's not being used, typically from what I understand, as a way of de-stressing from the chronic overload, the chronic stress. And of course, in the West, we know that stress now is thought to be responsible for 80 to 90% of the conditions that medical doctors see. If you're using alcohol as a way to mitigate stress, I'm not convinced it's going to have the same impact then if you're feeling really chilled and relaxed, you're using half a glass of wine to bond with one of your best mates who you've not seen in a while, I really do believe the impact on the body is going to be somewhat different. Also, speaking to what you just said about tea and coffee, let's say, tea and coffee are really interesting because we can epidemiologically look at populations. And I think last time you came on the podcast, we spoke a little bit about tea, and we'll definitely get to tea. So I know you're a huge tea fan, and how these long-living populations are consuming high amounts of tea and coffee. But also, to really get very granular, we can look in the lab and look at the cell and look at the science and reduce it right down and go, yes, tea and coffee have certain compounds that are going to be helping us. We can't really say the same for alcohol in the same way. Yes, epidemiologically, these populations are consuming. But then, as you said, yes, there are compounds within the alcohol. But if you look at the pure ethanol, I'm not sure yet we've got any scientific study showing that is good for our cells. Do you know what I mean? So I think on all these levels, we have to take a bit of balance and go, what else is going on in your life? Maybe the amount of alcohol you're currently consuming is not the best thing for you, perhaps.
No, I totally agree. And this idea of bonding is really important, because if you're getting together to celebrate an event or mark an event and bringing people together, that social bonding actually is really important. Your gut microbiome, by the way, also responds to the bonding by helping to text message your brain to release social hormones as well. So again, I think that we tend to oversimplify the impact of foods. Nuance, again, is really important. What happens in addition to the food? What's the context in which the food is actually eaten? It's healthier to eat with people than to eat alone. Not only are you more likely to eat less, but you're also connecting with others as well. And oftentimes, people are interested in the other's sense of purpose, which you then leave for yourself. All of these factors are there. And by the way, maybe to give another analogy that as we were talking, I was thinking about, we all do things that may not be the best for us occasionally, and that's okay. And I think giving people that acknowledgement of humanity and the occasional going off the reservation is totally fine. It's like when we drive a car, right? I mean, on the highway, most of us abide with traffic safety rules, and we drive in safe ways. Every now and then, you got to go into the fast lane and you speed and you go a little bit faster than you should, or maybe a lot faster than you should. But that's okay, for the most part. But if you got in the fast lane every single day and you put the pedal to the metal and went as fast as you possibly could, guarantee you that is unlikely to end up in a good way for you as a driver. And so I think that if we think about our lives as sort of a journey on a highway where the behaviors that we actually take, decisions that we make are not dissimilar to, the decisions we make in a car on the road, that might help us understand every now and then you need to go a little bit faster, maybe even above the speed limit. And that's okay as long as you're not doing it all the time.
Yeah. Your TED Talk, which of course has been viewed by millions of people now, there was a really interesting slide towards the end where I very much resonate with this idea. What's the root cause of multiple diseases? Can we, address the root cause, and then we're automatically going to take care of multiple different downstream consequences? And that was a very powerful slide showing that when angiogenesis is working well or when it's not working well, what can happen in the body. Could you just talk us through that lens, angiogenesis, because I think that's really interesting. And then you also mentioned cancer and blood supply. And again, could you just talk to us about cancer and how it can only grow to a certain size unless it gets its own blood supply as well, please?
Yeah, sure. Our circulation is these blood vessels, this network, and the blood is really the vehicle that carries oxygen and nutrients and everything else that our cells need to survive. So when we have the right amount, all of our organs are functioning properly. Sometimes we need a few extra blood vessels. So if you're working out and trying to build your muscles, When your muscles get bigger, it requires more blood vessels, bigger blood supply, no problem. Your angiogenesis system can actually supply and help to grow more of those blood vessels, but they keep it in proper volume. So not too many, not too few blood vessels. Very important principle of angiogenesis. That's health. We have good circulation. Now, here's what happens in disease. When you don't have enough blood vessels, what are some of the typical diseases that occur when you don't have enough blood flow? Well, one of the things is after a heart attack, if you cannot grow enough blood vessels, parts of your heart will get weaker. You can get heart failure, and a heart attack can actually be even fatal if you have inadequate blood vessels to try to bypass any temporary blockage. Same thing as a stroke. We know after there's a stroke, sometimes a clot gets sent to the brain and results in that type of stroke. Your angiogenesis defense system is scrambled to be able to immediately generate tiny little bypass vessels, get around that blockage to save the brain beyond the blockage. If you can't get enough blood vessels growing in that situation, parts of your brain die, and you wind up being paralyzed or having deficits after a stroke. In diabetes, many people with diabetes lose their legs. They have their legs amputated, mostly because they have problems healing wounds on their feet. Yeah. Now, the reason is because their nerves actually they go numb. Their nerves die back, diabetic neuropathy. And the reason that the nerves die back is because there's inadequate blood vessels feeding those nerves. So now in diabetes, some of those nerves in your feet and even your fingertips actually don't have enough blood supply. They die. When the nerves die, you can't feel when you step on a pebble and you create a little hole. That hole gets infected. That wound now also won't heal because it doesn't have enough blood vessels. That's an example of inadequate angiogenesis and cause a problem. And so now medical treatments actually have been designed to actually try to stimulate more blood vessels, to coax more vessels in where they're needed, but foods can also help do it as well. On the flip side, when you have too many blood vessels, and this is where cancer comes into play, it turns out that we all have cancer in our body. I mean, everyone fears cancer. The word actually, causes a shiver to run down most people's spine. Yeah. Everyone knows somebody who's been touched by cancer. And I would say most people know somebody who's died of cancer, actually. And so this is actually one of the most fearsome diseases, but yet biologically, we are actually all forming cancers in our body all the time, because all it takes for our 40 trillion cells to do is to make those little mistakes. Remember, I told you 10,000 mistakes are fixed every day. A few of those sneaking through will turn into a microscopic tumor, microscopic cancer. And this is called cancer without disease because a tiny little mutant cancer can grow up to the size of the tip of a ballpoint pen, and then it's frozen like a pimple. Can't go any bigger because it doesn't have a blood supply. No oxygen, no food, nothing to feed it. And so those little microscopic cancers sit there until another one of our defense systems, our immune system, wings by like a cop on a beat and sees this abnormal cell sitting on that street corner in a good neighborhood, and then says, "Get in the car, we're taking you away." And so our immune system destroys these microscopic cancers. But some microscopic cancers are able to hijack our body's regular angiogenesis defense system and selfishly grow blood vessels to feed themselves. Now, I worked in a lab studying angiogenesis, and we discovered that once an avascular or bloodless cancer is able to get vessels to touch it, the moment that touches it, the cancer can grow 16,000 times in 2 weeks. So literally, angiogenesis out of control is a trigger, an explosive trigger for tumor growth. And in fact, we know that if you can cut off the blood supply or prevent tumors from growing their blood supply, you can actually keep these cancers harmless for long periods of time. And so this is what foods are able to do. Foods that inhibit angiogenesis, they won't stop the good blood vessels from growing, because good blood vessels are actually solidly locked into your body. your defense system ensures you're not going to get rid of your good blood vessels with food, but those extra blood vessels tend to be fragile, and those are the ones that the foods that we eat, and then if necessary, drugs that we can prescribe can really just kind of shear those extra vessels away.
Yeah, this whole sort of field of angiogenesis and blood vessels, I think, is going to be fascinating for people, because I think many people, everyone's aware that they've got blood vessels inside them. I think a lot of people will think, I sort of learned this in biology at school, that there's the heart and the blood vessels, it pumps oxygen around the body. That's how oxygen gets to all my muscles and organs. But potentially it kind of ends there. Like, it doesn't go beyond that. And what I love about that explanation is when angiogenesis is not working well, we're not able to make new blood vessels where we need to, it can cause a whole multitude of different diseases. But also when it's kind of out of control or gets to these cancer cells, too much angiogenesis can cause problems. And therefore the question for me, Dr. Lee, is if angiogenesis sits at the heart of multiple different conditions, so we can look at it as a root cause, we also say similar things about chronic unresolved inflammation, don't we? We talk about inflammation being a root cause of lots of these chronic diseases. So can you speak a little bit about the relationship between inflammation and angiogenesis? Because it strikes me that they can't be separate. They probably sit side by side together in most cases.
Yeah, no, it's such a great question. I actually worked on research exactly looking at that interrelationship. Wow. So we know, well, let's take a look at just sort of something everybody recognizes, and to show how inflammation and blood vessel growth go hand in hand. If you are in the kitchen and you accidentally cut you're cutting a piece of fruit and you accidentally cut your finger or cut your hand, what's going to happen? It's going to bleed. All right. Now, so you're going to stop the bleeding. Then a few minutes later, you look at the cut. What's going to happen? It's swollen, it's puffy, it's red, because inflammation's actually gotten there. Your immune defenses have sent these inflammatory cells. These are the kind of super soldiers from our immune system that go there to kind of clean up and prevent any bacteria from rushing into that site. And then shortly thereafter, within a day or so, new blood vessels start growing, because the inflammatory cells, the cells from your immune system, started to release some signals to say, hey, you know what? We've cleaned up. It's time to reset the table. And so now blood vessels actually start to grow into it. So inflammation sends the signals for wound healing, for blood vessels to grow. By the same token, inflammation then goes away, which is why our wounds don't stay puffy the whole time. The puffy and redness goes away. The blood vessels grow, you get a scab, and before long, you're back to normal. And that's because both inflammation is turned off, like that's that car volume of the car radio, and also angiogenesis, once you get enough, it stops. And so this is getting back to that set point. Now, what happens when you actually have chronic anything? Usually it's not a good result. So inflammation being really good, a little bit is really good. So, I think a lot of people misunderstand, like, I want to get rid of all the inflammation in my body. No, you don't, because you want the ability of your body to be able to mount small amounts of inflammation when needed for a short period of time and then to go away. All right. That's you want that. That's life-saving. But what you don't want is for that inflammation to get there and the volume to keep turning up, or that it never gets turned back down. That's chronic inflammation, and that's abnormal. So your body, this whole idea of turning up and then turning down the volume for inflammation, if you can't turn it down, the inflammation continues to smolder in your body. An example I've given is sort of like for anybody who's listening who's enjoyed going camping.
Yeah.
You go into woods, you set up a tent, it gets cold at night. What do? You build a campfire. And that's like a little bit of inflammation, gives you warmth, that serves its purpose. And, when it's time to go to bed, you either let it burn down and you just, make sure that it's all walled off and you're fine. But that fire, if it doesn't burn down, but actually spills out and catches the forest on fire, now you actually got a problem, because now this thing is going out of control. And diseases with chronic inflammation, like lupus, like rheumatoid arthritis, like diabetes, frankly, you wind up actually having this chronic inflammatory state that starts to provoke all kinds of other things. And remember, we talked about tumors and angiogenesis. Well, if a tumor is kind of like a wound, it can hijack blood vessels, and you got inflammation, and now the cancer itself causes some inflammation, you're just making it a hell of a lot easier for that tumor to get a blood supply, which means that the cancer is more likely to grow. And in fact, we do see this in patients who are actually chronically inflamed. We know that inflammation is one of those hallmarks for people who develop cancer.
Hi there. If you enjoyed watching this video, I know you'll love the next one. Stay here and check it out, and I'll see you there.